Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Ryan Smith. This is ModX Network Voices, where we bring on experts in the offsite modular industry to talk about their work and progress. And today I'm pleased to welcome Doug Pill. He is President and CEO at PrefabLogic, which is a consultancy, but also does a lot more than that, which you'll learn about today. Doug, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Ryan, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I just invite you to introduce yourself. You can do that with slides. That'd be great. And then we'll have a Q&A afterwards.
Okay, fantastic. Again, my name is Doug Pill with PrefabLogic out here out of Nampa, Idaho. We're going to learn a little bit about Modular Innovation 2.0. We're going to start out with a little introduction about our company. Why don't we transition over into some slides here? So PrefabLogic was founded roughly 6 years ago by two gentlemen, Rick Murdoch and Curtis Fletcher. At inception, the vision of the company was to fill the void between the development client and the manufacturing partner. That vision hasn't really changed, but our product delivery method, our scopes, and our processes have evolved greatly over the last couple of years. So modular innovation for us, for an intro, we're going to talk a little bit about our company today, our team, our projects, the type of product that we heavily focus on, our proprietary sprint process, the why we do what we do, and our role and how we play a role in the outcomes. Our mission as a company really is defined into four very basic things. It's compression of time, the amount of time that projects rest in the pre-construction phase. It's reducing project expense, both during the pre-construction phase, during the manufacturing process, as well as that modular integration into the site. We'll kind of talk a little bit today about how we do that, how we accomplish that. Also to deliver highly coordinated products to our manufacturing partners and our general contracting clients, as well as to drive the modular industry forward through technology creation and innovation, which some of will see a little bit today. A little bit about our team. As I mentioned, Rick Murdoch and Curtis Fletcher are co-founders. Myself, Doug Pill, I run the design team, product management team, and the development teams. In terms of product, types of projects that we work on, it could be classified from a high level as high density products, whether that be type 3 or type 5, of course, wood frame product, but in the affordable housing space, market rate housing, senior assisted living, workforce housing, student housing, and also hospitality. Up into the pandemic, we had quite a number of hospitality products that we'd worked upon, but due to COVID, that's kind of slowed down a little bit. But I think we see some headwinds on the horizon for us in that particular area. So one of the things that we're going to focus on today a little bit is our proprietary sprint model process. And historically, it was not uncommon for projects to rest in the pre-construction phase in the modular industry for 12, 15, 18, 20 months, maybe even longer. And even with that time frame transpiring, the product that actually was delivered to the manufacturing partner wasn't optimal. It wasn't integrated or coordinated at the level that it needed to be, which caused manufacturing inefficiencies, delays, and ultimately oftentimes product being actually built offline out in the yard. With our proprietary sprint process, we've eliminated that. And so what we're looking at here ultimately is a very high level of our sprint process broken down by sprint by client. And so as you'll notice, the blue scopes there across the top, that's the developer scope. That would encompass sprint 1 and sprint 3. Sprint 1 is really about getting the product designed and detailed from an architectural and specification perspective that allows us to define that line in the sand, which we'll see here in just a few minutes, giving us clarity, all stakeholders clarity on what's actually going to be built. Moving on into sprint 2, that is the manufacturing integration. That'll be at a level that's probably unlike most of the audience viewing this has ever seen. Moving on to sprint 2.5, we take the same DFMA methodology, design for manufacturing and assembly methodology, that we apply into sprint 2, and we now have a very robust deliverable package for our general contracting clients that allows for seamless integration of that modular component into the field, into the job site. Moving on into sprint 3, as I mentioned, that's the state submittals package, that's the development scope, and then sprint 4 wrapping up from a high level, that's the shop drawing development, production, and distribution package. This is just a snapshot, Ryan, of what our sprint model format looks like in Gantt chart. And it really provides a baseline for the project for all stakeholders to work from. So as an example, if we kick off a project coming up here on 10/18 of 21, which I believe is Monday coming up, we're projected to be finished, ready to go into manufacturing on 5/20 of 22. Okay, and so if you look at sprint one there, we've got our deliverables defined, our process defined. If you look down there at line number 16, that represents a milestone in the process of what we call our architectural virtual reality review. So from 10/18, so essentially that's 5 weeks for round number from the time that we kick off a project. We'll bring all the stakeholders together and draw that line in the sand, if you will, from the architectural perspective. The sprint process allows us a critical path, critical chain, and defined due dates. And the accompanying document to this, which is we produce for every project, is what we call our sprint model requirement schedule. And this is just a snapshot, high-level overview of it. But what this does by discipline, architect, developer, general contractor, manufacturer, PrefabLogic, structural engineer, all of these stakeholders that are involved in the pre-construction process, from the moment that we kick off a project, if we reference back to that 10/18 date, they'll know by sprint and by day what deliverables are due, and we drive to that process. And so PrefabLogic, not only are we the architect of record for everything modular, but our team actually drives through the sprint process for congruency, constructability, feasibility, all the way through, okay? Moving into, at the end of sprint one, we actually get to spec lock, and this is a very robust package that defines by room. There's some generalities in this particular document, but by room, whether that be a dwelling unit or a common area, boiler room, electrical room, low volt room, everything that's going to be purchased and installed in the modules in the manufacturing environment. Well, as we mentioned before, Ryan, we'll get into a point to where roughly 5 weeks in, we will bring all those stakeholders together and give them a visual representation of our work product this far. And I say this is a visual representation because the truth is, this is a very data-rich environment. Every component that you see modeled here is actually modeled to spec. There are no placeholders in this architectural model, meaning the faucet that you'll see there, the cabinets that you see, the appliances that you see, the receptacles, lighting, everything is actually modeled to spec. And what that allows us to do is not only provide this very robust, comprehensive visual representation of what's going to happen, but it allows us to actually start extracting data very early on in this process for our manufacturing partners. An example, the door hardware, we'll know who the manufacturer is, what the model is, all of those data points, colors, that we can begin extracting literally, let's say 70 to 80 days into the project, so they can start getting ahead of that procurement cycle. Everybody knows procurement's a challenge for builders and modular manufacturers, but when you lay on top of it the supply chain issues that manufacturers and builders are facing today, the earlier we can get that information to them, the far better the project goes. And we're in a position today to be able to provide this information literally 80 days after we kick off a project. So the intent for this originally was to give all the stakeholders the ability to make final changes before we proceed into sprint 2, because the sprint process is progressive. We don't go from line 7 in sprint 1 to line 8 until line 7 is done, because it ensures that we're eliminating all but completely eliminating rework and everybody's congruent in the status of the project. Does that make sense? So this slide is representative, Ryan, of really it's a visual representation of showing folks that your ability to make changes that don't impact cost and delays are really early in the process. And this is an example data set out of a project that we had done that shows early on and prior to kickoff in sprint 1, when we make changes, it doesn't delay the project and it doesn't affect cost for the project. But the moment that we start getting into sprint 2 is really where when we have changes, where we start seeing delays in pre-construction and cost escalation in pre-construction because of those changes and rework. At the end of the architectural review, we'll make changes, any changes that have been done by the development client or the interior designer or the architect, and we'll produce a very robust deliverable. We call it our client approval package. And out of this particular package, anything that has been designed, defined, or specified will be produced in this document. And it's roughly about 80 pages, depending on the project, but it'll provide overall 2D and 3D plan sets and large 2D and 3D plans. You see the floor plan here on the left-hand side of this screen, the detailed 3D views and diagrams, cross-building sections, elevations, and schedules. One of the things that we had been requested to do by some of our clients is, as much as they appreciated the architectural virtual reality review that we do 45 to 50 days in from the time we kick off a project, they needed something memorialized that ancillary stakeholders could utilize, whether that be leasing agents or lenders or other investors that didn't have the ability to access the virtual reality environment. And so we created an application that allowed us to provide that to them. And it's a Render 360. So anything that has an elevation in that particular building or in that dwelling unit, if you will provide Render 360s for those folks to actually leverage and utilize as a tool. Think about having a leasing agent on a particular project that can access this, 60 days in from the time that we kick off a project. Their leasing strategy changes. How they market this product changes. Now, keep in mind, this is a static image. There's no data behind this environment here. It's all static, but it's 100% clear, accurate representation of what will be done, what those units will look like. So if it's we have a number of sprint processes that we go through today. One would be sole sourced, where a manufacturer brings a product to us and we begin our process. If it's a traditional sprint process, one of the services that we provide is actually we can compile all this information, we produce the bid package, and we begin sending that out to our manufacturing partners for them to bid on. Once we get that wrapped up and the manufacturer is selected, if it's a traditional sprint process, what we'll do is we'll go immediately into Sprint 2. This is a separate contract. This is actually a contract and deliverable for the manufacturing partner. What we're looking at here, Ryan, is we were flying over level 1 of the particular building. But as you can see, everything is integrated to spec. And just like in the architectural model, there are no placeholders in this environment. All of the data that we can extract out of the architectural model, we can also extract out of for our manufacturing partner, whether that be dimensional lumber. If they have automated saws, we're feeding to them where they're running dados, how big those dados are, thick, wide, and dimensionally, where all those holes need to be drilled in the roof joists. How much conduit they would need to build this modular, to build a level, or to build a building, or to build an entire project. All of those light fixtures, everything in there that you're seeing represented visually actually has hundreds and hundreds of points of data behind it that allows them to get ahead of this. The next thing that we do during the process, and it actually provides part of our QA/QC process, is Navisworks. And many people have heard of Navisworks. And if I talk to 10 of them, 5 of them tell me it's okay. 5 of them will tell me it's pretty good. And what we found is, depending on the level of development that you're integrating to, everything that we do for our manufacturing partners begins at about 400 and ends at about 500 in terms of LOD. We actually not only get to extract clash detection out of the Navisworks environment, we also get to ensure that we're executing constructability and feasibility in our digital twin, because that's really what we do. We produce a 100% accurate digital twin of what would be built in the manufacturing environment digitally. As an example, all of those ducts, all of the exchange units that you see there in that Navisworks platform, that's 100% modeled to spec. As I mentioned, there's nothing in there. If we were not modeling to spec, we would not have the ability to determine constructability and feasibility in this environment. Modular interface plan, that's part of our deliverable during Sprint 2, interface between modules and podium or foundation. The next deliverable that we're going to show you here is it's actually an augmented reality environment, and this was really developed for our manufacturing partners to improve coordination in between everybody, all stakeholders in the manufacturing floor. It's integrated into our BIM model. It allows for live measurement. So if a QA or QC person is within that environment and they want to check dimensions between the end of a cabinet and the end of a wall, they can do that within this environment here. Okay. It also allows for real-time updates. Now, this is scalable in any scale that you want. We've actually taken a particular module and placed it on our conference room table. If this was a 1-to-1 ratio, it would have been 74 feet long, wouldn't have fit in this environment. But you can, in your iPad, open this up, center from the corner of a module, open that module, and be immersed in that augmented reality environment. As I think I mentioned, this is real-time updates. So if something's updated in the Revit model, it will automatically update into this environment here. And ultimately what this does, besides collaboration and coordination, it improves quality control and quality assurance for our manufacturing partners. Now, a couple of unique things that we built into this environment is that if you're a QA or you're QC, or let's say you're someone out on the floor that you're actually framing or you're installing electrical and you just want to look at electrical, you actually have the ability to begin turning off and turning on in that same environment, never leaving the environment. You can toggle on and off all the disciplines that you want to see or toggle off the disciplines that you don't want to see in the same environment. But from there, let's spend just a moment talking about Sprint 2.5. And historically, what has happened in modular construction is a manufacturer will get done with the modules and they'll celebrate. Heck, they might even have a barbecue. And they'll wave at those last modules going away, heading down the road to the job site. And the general contractor and ultimately their sub-trades are the ones left to try and figure this thing out. And some manufacturers, say, hey, bring your sub-trades up to the plant. Let's spend some time. We'll educate them a little bit. But oftentimes that happens long before the manufacturing process. Even if it happens incongruent with the manufacturing process, once they get back down there on the job site, if it's 150 or 200 or 400 module project, the level of retention and their ability to execute upon that is lost quickly. And so we've developed what we call Sprint 2.5. We believe today it is the industry leading modular on-site completion package deliverable that's out there. It incorporates, of course, formatted in 30 by 42 plan sets, 2D and 3D plans and those large plan sets, the detailed 3D views and diagrams, and also detailed on-site conditions. If you look at that boiler room up there in the top right-hand corner, traditionally a modular manufacturer is not going to design or coordinate anything for that because they're not completing it. Someone else is doing that in the field. They're only focused on what is happening in that modular environment. And so when that particular boiler room, that module gets set down there on the podium, if you will, what's going to happen is they then have to try and figure out how to get that boiler room installed. We've taken all of that off their plate, whether that be chases, boiler rooms, low volt rooms, community kitchens, community laundry rooms, mail rooms. It doesn't matter. Anything that's going to be completed in that modular and those modules, once they arrive on site, that's actually coordinated and integrated to the same level that we do for our manufacturing partners. One of those deliverables happens to be the Navisworks model. So they can enter this, the general contractor, their sub-trades can enter this Navisworks environment. This is part of the deliverables I mentioned, and identify and coordinate chases, anything that they might need to do. But we've taken it even level further beyond that for coordination. And ultimately what we've done is we've created that augmented reality environment for Sprint 2.5 as well. And what's important about this, Ryan, is ultimately, if you've got a superintendent that's sitting on the job site and he has a sub-trade, maybe the young lady that's installing or the guy that's installing mechanical in this particular corridor or the boiler room or whatever it might be, isn't on the job site, they can actually go into their iPad and they'll see an avatar, and anywhere where that super is looking in that environment, the person that's in that same environment will see where he's looking as well. Okay. Ultimately, this is a free service in terms of accessibility. We pay for the development license. One of the reasons that we went with Unity was once we buy the development license, we own that environment. Whether there's one stakeholder or 250 stakeholders that need to access this in the field, we can grant them access for utilization. Okay. Out of this deliverable is also a materials takeoff, and that's done by discipline, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, anything that would have to be completed on site. We can do that by level, grand totals of the project. This drives down cost management and improves data integration. So out of this CSV format that we'll provide as the deliverable, the general contractor can then go in and provide their costs. So they'll know long before this project ever comes what it's going to take in terms of a budget to complete it in terms of materials. During Sprint 2, we'll actually get to a scope lock. This is another service that our product management team provides. And so we will define everything that's going to happen with those modules, who's going to be buying it, where it's going to be installed, and who's going to be installing it, long before those ever gets into production. And so beyond that, Sprint 3, as I mentioned, that is a development client scope. That's where we generate out of our work product. We generate our state submittal package. We manage it. I think I also mentioned that PrefabLogic is the architect of record for everything modular. And we'll submit that to the receiving state or third-party plan review agency, manage through that process until we have stamps from the state. At the end of that, last one is shop drawing production. Many of our manufacturing partners today are paperless in their environments. And so we're either producing and distributing these via digital media or prints in PDF format that they can produce and work off of in their production environments. Ryan, that is a very quick high-level overview of PrefabLogic. That is traditionally that's been extracted out of about a 2-hour conversation. I think we did in about 25 minutes. So what can I help you with in terms of questions, my friend?
Yeah, so our audience, fortunately, many of them are familiar with the modular industry and will know kind of what you're talking about. But what I find fascinating about your presentation, Doug, is in many ways, PrefabLogic has emerged within from a project delivery context in the United States, in which we're using traditional contracts and traditional delivery systems. And once you go to modular, it starts to present some wrenches in that. And you've been able to come in and say, we can fix that, we can fix that, and we can expedite that. Whereas the traditional players and stakeholders aren't able to do that, right? The architect of record, the general contractor who's handling the boxes, and then of course the manufacturers themselves that probably should be moving more in the direction of services, but they're kind of unwilling to. They just want to stay with the product itself. So I just wondered, in light of all of that, you know, PrefabLogic certainly has been instrumental in California projects and moving along multifamily and hospitality and educating these teams continuously. But I guess one question, I am sure you're dealing with this as a company, is are you eventually putting yourself out of a job because these teams become knowledgeable on how to do it, and then they start to take them forward into subsequent projects? Or do you think that's not going to happen in the next 50 years, and so no problem?
Well, it's a great question, and it's something that we surround ourselves on occasionally. Don't center on it, because the truth is our industry has a long way to go, right? I mean, depending on the numbers that you look at, Ryan, we're somewhere between 3 to 4% of the starts nationally in that whole mix, right? And our vision is not just to be a service provider. We're really becoming, and we didn't even touch on this today, we're really becoming a technology and a data company. Right? Yeah. We'll always do services, but the amount of data that we're extracting and managing and delivering to stakeholders across all platforms today is beyond impressive. Whether that be for an automated manufacturing facility or a manual labor plant, what these folks are recognizing is Whether let's utilize, put in context, a manual labor plant, right? The amount of data just for procurement alone that we can provide to these plants so much earlier in the process allows for optimization and efficiencies through that process, right? Yeah. And let's say that we can help them understand that at some point in time, if they were to acquire, let's say, one automated saw, what that would do for their manufacturing environment. Sure. If they could only increase production capacity by a half a floor a day, what would that mean to their margins? What would that mean to their ability to go from 2 a day to 2.5 a day and take on 2 more projects a year? Right? Our ability to extract that data for that one lone automated saw plays an enormous impact on the ecosystem of modular construction moving forward, right? And one of the things that you mentioned that I think is worth bearing just touching on quickly is, right, we see it as our vision, our mission for continued optimization. We produce a product during our education process as part of our sales cycle, honestly. It's called a modular feasibility study. And out of that modular feasibility study, we'll produce to that development client modular ROM costs, transportation costs, crane set, structural connection. And I'm telling you the story of actually how Sprint 2.5 was developed, because we'd produced one of those back in 2019 for a development client, and they'd reached out and asked if we would spend a few minutes on the phone with they and their general contractor. And we said, of course, it's education, that's what we do. And so we got through this 40 minutes of intro to the budgets for modular, and the development client asked the question to the general contractor, what is it going to cost to complete the corridors in these modules? Now keep in mind, Ryan, this is a studio project. So it's double loaded corridor product, studio on each side. And he said, that's pretty simple. It's $130,000. And I asked the question, what does that mean? He said, that's per door. And I said, so what you're telling me is the module, to build it, ship it, crane set it, and connect it, it's $150,000. And it's going to cost $260,000 to complete 14 feet of corridor for your MEP? He said, yeah, that's what it is. I said, no, that's not. That can't be. And so that was really the original concept behind what we had dubbed corridor modeling. And we developed that, worked with a development client, their GC, and they said, it's great, it's not enough. We need everything modular. Anything that's going to be completed in those in those modules, boiler rooms, low volt rooms, community kitchens, all leasing space that the modular manufacturer is not going to complete, they need it. And that's how Sprint 2.5 was developed. And we beta tested it with 3 GCs today, and it's making that impact. It's driving the cost of modular completion down.
That's great. I have another question as it relates to product versus project. So each project is unique, should be, and has unique site conditions, of course, different stakeholders often, which presents some problems. But in light of that, still, there's knowledge that PrefabLogic brings to bear because of its relationships with manufacturers, but all of this knowledge that's embedded in these models and experience that you bring on projects. How do you start to balance the bespoke nature of each project, the custom nature of each project, with a set of principles and standards and knowledge that you bring to bear, i.e. a product platform or product knowledge? How do those two things come together, and how do you operate to optimize those product efficiencies while accomplishing the bespoke nature of each project? I know it's a big question, but it's one that... No,
it's valid. It's totally valid. I mean, if you think about the modular industry as a whole, let's just take the past 2 decades as a data set, right? I would venture to guess that somewhere far north of 95%, every modular project that's been built has been a unique snowflake. Okay, there are things happening right now that's changing, right? There are platforms being developed today that will change that in the future. And so really I come back and we rest on the strength of our knowledge, and that is process, workflow, and the understanding of what it takes to get it successfully built. We call it the Ford F-150 methodology. When Ford releases a new Ford F-150 that's going to roll down the production line, 100% of that product has been vetted. There's no questions. Sally, George, and Bill are not standing there looking at their production supervisor in Detroit and asking them where the screw goes, right? How do I connect this? Okay. And that's what we've gotten to. That's what we have to get to as an industry. And that's where we're at today. We're confident and we're comfortable that we've developed the process, the workflow, and the technology to accommodate that. Because when I'll use another example, right? One of our manufacturing partners built a 160 module project not too long ago. And to my knowledge, Ryan, it is the first time ever in the history of our industry that not one module was built out of station, let alone anything built offline. That not one module was built out of station, and not one module left that manufacturing environment transported to the storage yard that wasn't 100% complete. And that project was completed 100% on time. Okay. Our product delivery method, our process, our workflow, our technology, and our systems allowed that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have to get there as an industry to deliver on the promise of modular, but also just to meet the pent-up demand for housing in this country.
It's a global issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, for coming and explaining what PrefabLogic does and the value it creates from both a product and a process perspective. And we're really looking forward and watching to see how your approach to technology as it's applied to this particular industry transforms it and also allows us to build a lot more housing, which is what's needed. So thank you for coming on and doing that. We appreciate it.
Ryan, thank you for the invite again, and I look forward to our time together next week.
Great. See you. Bye.
Thanks.